Listener discretion advised. This episode contains discussion of serious mental health topics, including addiction, self-injury, and suicide. If you are in a crisis, please visit SamaritansHope.org or call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255 to find help.
All right, so last night your boy had the minor misfortune of watching Iron Man 3. And while in its entirety it is nowhere near a great movie, it does do one thing really, really well in that it brings up the discussion of Tony Stark's PTSD in a way that is not only very tasteful, but adds a lot to his arc as a character.
Iron Man 3 essentially follows the aftermath of a traumatic experience while superheroing in the previous movie, and throughout there are several scenes that are dedicated to showing Tony Stark being vulnerable and having several panic attacks, and it introduces the idea of PTSD in the MCU for the first time ever with a major character and actually focuses on the character arc.
Yeah, and it isn't just used as a way to be like, oh, look how deep our movie is. It's used in a way that actually enriches Tony Stark as a character, makes him more relatable, and makes him just feel more human than a man in a robot suit should be. But that isn't always the case. Media has shown time and time again that it isn't always ready to be discussing such heavy topics, and here to join me on this discussion is my beautiful co-hosts, Nathan and Meena. I'm Jacob, by the way.
And I'm Malia.
Forgot to mention that. We have names.
Hello, Nathan. When it comes to like certain mental illnesses and just, I guess, instabilities being represented in media, I think there's a lot of different shows that try to seem mainstream or different, seem hip in a way to try to like portray like depression and things like that. Or like the other day I watched Split, and
First off, why?
It's an interesting movie. I think so. I think so. Like the main character, of course, he has multiple personalities, and I think the way they portray all of these personalities, it's weird because it's like they assume that each of his personalities are all the same in the way that they want to keep these girls captive.
Yeah,
I understand that, like, it's all same body type of thing. They all do different personalities, but, like, they don't all think the same in a way. Like, one of them's a little boy, and he is obsessed with these girls, but at the end of the day, like, he's a little boy, and yet he's still just like all the other personalities, wants to keep these girls hostage. It's a little weird.
Yeah, that movie is very strange, not only in that, but spoiler alert for, like, a 4 or 5-year-old movie, the twist at the end, because, Shyamalan movies and their twists is just problematic on a number of levels. It is revealed that the main girl is quote-unquote strong in a way to split James McAvoy man because she has a lot of scarring on her body, some of which appears to be self-inflicted, some of it appears to be inflicted through other various physical traumas, and it was just a very strange message for a movie that's already filled with a lot of strange messaging.
I don't even think, not only, well, that, yeah, it definitely was strange, but the fact that they give the idea that mental illness gives you powers in a way, because his, I guess you could say, final form, it's like he takes a shotgun, shot, and, as if it was nothing. Because it said, he has skin of a rhino.
Oh, yeah.
And,
I like that.
I don't know if that's how that works.
Yeah, and I think that in that specific example, you do need to suspend your disbelief a little bit.
Yeah. Because
it is meant to be like a quote-unquote superhero movie. But there's also examples like, to get into a really topical one, 13 Reasons Why.
Oh my god.
Which I think the collective groan that just came across the room should say enough about it, but it's very problematic for just all of the reasons.
Well,
when I remember hearing about 13 Reasons Why, I think it was 2017, was it?
About that, yeah.
Around that time. And I was in middle school. Yeah, finishing 8th grade. And so one of my friends was just like, oh my god, it's so good, you should really watch it. And I'm a person that's very, very reluctant to watch things once my friends recommend me it. Like, I don't know why. And so I remember I found the book. I think I was in detention or something. And I found the book, and because, I didn't want to do my homework, I picked it up and I started reading it. And I think 13-year-old me really didn't understand the book, and I took the book home and I read it and I, finished it, and I was just like, I don't know exactly how to describe this, but I don't like it at all. And I think I watched a few episodes of the first season, and it blew me away for the wrong reasons. All I was thinking was, who in their right mind? Who? Why? And I have not watched the recent seasons, and I'm, not going to, because it's not an accurate portrayal of mental health, and there are there's so many other shows that have those elements and portray it better. And this, I don't know if this is exactly relating to 13 Reasons Why, but noting that all of the shows that I've watched with a lot of mental health aspects have been youth coming of age, and naturally the people who are going to be watching those are, people who can relate and people who are young. And if 13-year-old me is going to pick up a book that doesn't accurately portray mental health, I wonder, I can't imagine how other people who are young and can't really understand at the time, and then they start to use that lens of what they've learned from these types of media to portray mental health.
I believe what 13 Reasons Why is most condemned for is for the graphic depictions of suicide and self-mutilation on screen, which has been known by many psychiatrists when I was doing my research, at the Bradley Hospital, that is, at most risk for imitation when you're showing people just, these graphic scenes of, Hannah Baker, who does, commit suicide in a very, graphic way, just showing that can lead to I read a website that said it was contagion. It could increase the risk for contagion.
Yeah, and I think a very important thing Meena touched on is that the audiences for these shows are so young.
Yeah.
And because it's whoa, hip, relatable teens, and then one of them kills herself and it miraculously solves all her problems, that's not only a message that isn't cool, it's also kind of dangerous, just in that people are so impressionable, and there were, I think, 3 or 4 reported cases of copycat type deals.
I think that's what they're going for in a way. I think they're not the suicide, that's their target audience. People, or these teens or kids in middle school who this is pretty much one of their first, exposures to mental health and how it's represented. And if they see it this way, then that's how they think that they need to act in a way when they're mentally unstable, or they pick up these traits, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, it's definitely in the way that it's marketed, where it's oh yeah, look at this controversial topic. Isn't that so adult? Our middle school audience, whoa, you're so mature for watching this show. Yeah. When in reality, all it really is being hey kids, here's a glamorized version of a girl killing herself.
And I think one of the worst parts is that there's a scene near the end, spoiler, where she goes to a guidance counselor, and he completely doesn't really take her seriously and brushes off her concerns and just kind of leaves her, tries to blame her for the situation. And I think it is really harmful for young kids to see a guidance counselor be portrayed in such a negative light in terms of this, because it could lead to the false impression that therapists and just can't be trusted. And I feel we need to steer away from that as a trend, because it is important to encourage people to get help.
Yeah, we've all had bad adults who just aren't helpful, but like Malia said, it's very just it's a weird move they decided to do, making her guidance counselor just not only unhelpful, but like actively an antagonist in this show.
Yeah.
I think, like also that part where she goes to him and he just brushes her off. I think that we oftentimes, like, we as youth see that and we start to think that, oh, the people who we are supposed to trust and talk to won't be there for us and won't see us as person that they should confide in. And I think that is so wrong, and that creates the impression that for youth, their problems should not be talked to by therapists and people who can help and who are there to help. And I think that's very unhealthy and something that, you know, middle schoolers like me at the time should not have been consuming, because it leads to all this.
Another like really weird trope of sorts that has been like popping up in a lot of shows is that like being damaged makes you deep, or giving someone like some sort of like emotional baggage makes them a better character, where yes, adding that extra layer can help make a character more relatable or more like, that's only if it's done right. And if you take shows like, I know we talked about this last week, Supernatural show, a lot of people love it. I used to be a big fangirl of it. It falls off. But Dean, one of the main characters, he has this like, I'm the damaged guy and I'm gonna protect you syndrome, where it's just like actively very toxically represents how people deal with things, because he deals with it by not dealing with it. It makes that seem like a good thing. Like literally in the 11-ish seasons of the show, it is just never, his emotional baggage is just never resolved. That's just who he is. And I think that that's probably the most concerning thing I've seen on TV. I mean, the most concerning thing I've seen on TV in this like genre. I've seen a lot of weird crap on TV, but I think that does send a really weird message where it's like, hey, if you don't get help, you're cooler, which I really don't think is something we should be telling kids, because like, you know, maybe I am digging too deep, but it's a lot of TV shows do this. Like, just take a show on the CW. They're probably
Riverdale.
Oh my god.
Oh my god.
I was gonna bring up Riverdale because the main character Betty, she has a lot of like trauma in her life, and she's very like unresolved mental health issues.
Trauma.
And so
emotional baggage.
Whenever she's not doing well, they call her Dark Betty, and she wears a black wig and lingerie and just like acts very inappropriately with her boyfriend, with just some really just gross stuff, and just like her like acting out on it. And it's so weird how they just call her Dark Betty and like black wig black lingerie, just like having an attitude, trying to kill someone in a hot tub. And it's just like a really incorrect way to deal with this, and just another example of how like, oh, like being unresolved makes me cool.
Wait,
dark,
Malia,
and
did
edgy.
you not know that being depressed makes you a stripper? Is that not something that's been communicated?
No, that wasn't like
to you?
common knowledge to me.
Oh no,
apparently.
every time. That's just how it works. No, that's sarcasm. Yeah, no, the way a lot of shows depict it just isn't cool at all or helpful. Honestly, it's probably more a hindrance to people than anything else, because it makes it seem like being messed up is something that's like hip and cool. I think anyone who's ever really interacted with me can tell that, or knows that I have this like really intense hatred for Perks of Being a Wallflower, because that is what I trace this trend back to. Because okay, everyone in that whole book is just so like messed up in the most cartoonish ways possible, and it's just never resolved. It's never been really like acknowledged. They're just like, hey, I'm depressed. Isn't that cool, Charlie? Now let's go chain smoke. And that's the book. That's the entire book. And it's just, I'm not saying every piece of media needs to be like super like woke and helpful, but like it would help if at least like a majority would be. And I think there are a lot of positive examples we could talk about, so I would like to steer the conversation more into that. So has anyone seen anything recently that was like, whoa, that was not completely eye-gougingly terrible?
Sex Education. I think it was a show that I, like, as a person who struggles with, you know, continuously watching a show, I think that's one show that I've binge watched till the end. And I think that all the characters are more than their disabilities and more than the mental health issues that they have, and it deals with it in a way that both like the characters as youth can rely on each other, and there's a lot of positive not just parental influences but people with who are capable enough to help that are helping, and a lot of the characters are there for each other, and the show is really good in the sense that we can see who they are and like a lot of the times where their issues stem from, and not exactly that it immediately gets resolved, but there's like a healthy relationship between who they are and what they struggle with. And I think that's like very unlike what Malia was saying about how the dark Betty and the regular Betty, because I really dislike how they separate like the mental illness from the person, because they're one person, not just like a bag that you can just, pick up and put down. Because
Are you implying that people are more than just their emotional baggage?
wow, I might be.
Wow, I never would have guessed that.
In a way, there are certain medias that like, the two that I'll mention are I Am Sam. They're both movies. I Am Sam and The Accountant.
I thought your name was Nathan. You lying to us?
Yeah, sorry.
I'm cool.
So no, the two movies, they both tackle the idea of autism in two very different ways, I feel. So like within the two main characters, they're on both ends of the spectrum, I think, in a way. The Accountant, him being, I wouldn't say high functioning, but like, in the middle of that range, kind of like he's quiet, but in a way like he's still goes on about his day-to-day
Wait, I'm
life.
sorry. Accountant with Ben Affleck.
Yeah.
Okay.
That, and then I Am Sam, he's definitely lower on the spectrum, and it does accurately depict, I think, some of the symptoms or different characteristics of someone with autism. The way that they battle it and stuff in like I Am Sam, I think it's needed, because they don't show the fact that a lot of these pieces of media, you like want to go straight to people wanting to help these people in different ways. In I Am Sam, they show the like the dark stuff behind it, and how having a mental illness can be shunned. You can be shunned out for certain things, and like the person who has the mental illness doesn't like entirely understand that. But then there's also moments within the movie where people really sympathize with him. And I think that it's really cool to show that, like, not everyone needs fixing. Because sometimes it feels so good to just listen to someone and to just hear them. Because at the end of the day, autism, something like that, isn't fixable. So I think it was really cool to show that they just met his needs in a way.
Yeah. My favorite trend in the media regarding mental health is therapy. And I think that it's very helpful to show that happening. There's a show, it's targeted at young teens, called Alexa and Katie. And in season 3, a lot of the narrative is told through like the main character going through therapy. And it's not like, it's like a sitcom. It's not just super dark and grimy, but like it kind of, I feel, is an attempt to normalize therapy in a way, because it's just like brought up and it's like shown so casually. And also by the finale, one of the main characters, Katie, she does suffer from a panic attack right before going to the SATs, and I feel like it was shown and done in a very tasteful way, and also showing the aftermath of it, of her in therapy, and talking about like tips and things to do and things not to do. So I feel like just media makers need to show more representation of therapy, and just like not treating it like it's something taboo. And I feel like that would definitely be beneficial towards impressionable teens and younger kids, because I feel like that is a great way of handling mental stress.
Yeah, and you brought up addiction, and I just got like a very like vivid flashback of Jessica Jones. Did anyone watch Jessica Jones?
Bits and pieces.
All right, just stick to bits and pieces, because bits and pieces are good. The whole show, oh my god. Okay, best episode There is a reoccurring character in the show, part of the supporting cast, who has a drug addiction, and in the span of one episode, it's cured. Like that.
Oh my
Amazing.
goodness.
It's literally just like the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen.
It's a miracle.
Honestly, hallelujah. But no, Jessica handcuffs said supporting character to a radiator and essentially says, "Hey, heroin's bad, stop it."
What?
And in the course of 10 minutes, man's not only cured, but is a genius.
Great.
And it's just like,
Oh my god.
what were you trying to say here? That's not how any of this
Yeah,
works.
no.
No. Addiction
Hate
isn't
it.
something you just like wake up and you're better.
Or waiting for somebody, that one person to come along and fix you.
Yeah, and you don't
Hate it.
You don't just sit by a radiator and miraculously not have an addiction anymore.
Too many people go through relapses to be able to just stop it.
Yeah, and it's just like I said earlier, it's TV, media, we've come a long way, but there's a long way we gotta go.
Yeah.
'Cause it's just so distasteful a lot of the time.
There is hope, Jacob. There is hope.
there?
We
Is
are
there?
getting better. And I think a good example of this is One Day at a Time, where it does show a character relapsing on drugs. And it's not so much about him, but about the people around him. And there's a situation where, like, one of the sons of a close family friend finds him completely screwed up, and the said person who screwed up tells him, like, okay, don't
to a radiator.
no,
miraculously
stop
gets better.
it. He says, don't tell anyone about this, like, don't say a word. And the kid is like, okay. And then cut to the next scene, the kid telling the appropriate people about it and telling them the situation. And I think that is also important because we need more examples showing what to do rather than what not to do, because I feel like that's a lot more helpful. So I feel like definitely a trend that needs to pop up more is explaining what to do more than what not to do.
Yeah, the door's open. We're getting there. We're not there yet. But the door's open. Like, my foot's in it. We're here. We're chilling.
Hopefully there will be a day where the youth of tomorrow can actually watch healthy stuff that, I don't want youth to experience like things that I experienced as a youth in media, because if it's worse now, we just have to get better at portraying all these stuff, and it will get better. Speaking it into existence.
Now, segue time. We are actually out of time, so...
Oh, I didn't know. Thanks for listening. Subscribe to our podcast here, join our newsletter at the link in the description, and follow us on social at Teens in Print.
You can read our print newspaper at bostontip.com or at your local Boston Public Library.
If you're a Boston resident, middle or high school student interested in joining Teens in Print, you can reach out to us at bit.ly/tip1920 or at the links in the description.
This has been Meena,
Jacob.
Malia.
And Nathan.
Voice crack.
See you next time.
After school.
Wouldn't it be nice to live together?
In the kind of world where we belong. I don't know the rest of the words, but this song was in a trailer. I will write shows about sad people, and I'll do it for cheaper. Networking.